Okay, I believe our next speaker is here, and she will be speaking on data-driven community, metrics that matter in Web3, in person of Mfonobong Umondia.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Okay, that's better. So you didn't murder my name. It's pronounced as Mfonobong Umondia, but you can call me Lady Bella. How do I do that? Lady Bella. Okay, so I am a community manager. I currently work with She Code Africa. I'm also a developer advocate, and I'm building a small, not small, just a marketing professional agency for all kinds of marketers. So if your role directly or indirectly ties into marketing, that's where you should be. And from time to time, I do share some tech and productivity shenanigans on YouTube. So you may want to check that out. And yes, I am also a chef. So that's not new. You can connect with me at the Lady Bella on Twitter. Global. All right. So I'm going to be talking about data driven metrics. How many of us are community managers here? Okay. You're part of a community. Okay. Interesting. All right. So, first of all, I'd like us to understand the landscape. Sometimes people say that communities are just support groups where a bunch of people come together and just talk about random things. But in recent times, things have changed because before then, people just used to create communities as support groups. So let's say there's a company that's building a project or trying to work on something. They just put together a community of like-minded people that are interested in that product. So we give it a name called support group. Nowadays, it's not the case. It's actually the product itself. Because with community, you're able to push your products regardless of whether it's in Web3 or Web2, whatever it is. With community, you're able to push that because you have first-hand access to the actual users of that product. So you stand a chance to access feedback, testing, and whatnot. All right. And just before I talk about this, I must also add that people often open communities and then there's always that hype. Oh, I want to join XYZ community. And after a month or two, in most cases, it doesn't even last up to a month. The hype just dies down. And that's to show you that a lot of people don't build communities for sustainability. They just build it because they want to build a community around a product or around a particular thing, which is why I am talking to you about data driven community. Because if you understand the data to track in your community, you'd be able to keep people around much longer. So, yeah, because Web3 is decentralized, traditional growth models don't always apply. We have different communities that use different metrics or different strategies to grow their communities. It doesn't exactly work like that in Web3, right? And even there are some strategies I use in Web3 that you can't also use in Web2. It just differs. First off, you need to understand the kind of community that you are building to know the kind of strategy to even use for it. So that's to say that even within Web3, there are some strategies that you use for company or community A that you cannot use for community B. But all the same, it still boils down to the data that you're tracking in each of those communities. And these are common mistakes that we make. First of all, you might see 1,000, 2,000, 7,000 people in a community and will go ahead to say, oh my God, the community is so huge. There's so many people in that community. But the truth of the matter is, how many people in that community can you boast of that participate in conversations? You have an event, how many of them genuinely come out because they want to learn and grow? or how many of them decide that they want to host sessions? Like, how progressive is their learning? So it's not about the numbers. You might have the numbers, especially on Discord, and that's particularly because there are lots of people that join communities because of the hype. They just want to be a part of something, not because they don't know what they are doing there, right? There are some communities you go to and you ask someone what is going on in this community or what kind of activities happen here. They probably would not know, right? And these are common mistakes. So first off, in community management, metrics are measurable indicators that show how healthy, active, and valuable your community is. So for you to understand your metrics, first off, you're going to know, it's going to help you understand who is in the community, what's the growth and demographics, where are they joining from, what kind of things are they doing, what level in their career are they at, do you have more entry levels, do you have more mid levels, do you have more senior levels, how do they interact? If you have events, if you have sessions, if you have Twitter spaces, how do these people interact? Do they interact with people that understand what's going on? Or are they just there to fill up the space? Thirdly, what value do they create? There's something called giving back to the community, something called contribution. You're not just being a part of a community. Let's say for most of you here, by next year, you would want to give back to Web3 Lagos. Say, oh, I would like to speak at your event, or I'd like to do this. That's contribution. And then lastly, it also helps you check whether they stay long term, right? That's retention, that's loyalty. The first thing is for you to attract. Second thing is for you to retain those people and get them to give back to the community. All right, so in communities in general, these are metrics that actually matter. First off is the growth. You can't stay at 1,000 community members forever, no matter how big you are, even if you have up to 100,000 community members. So are new people joining? The initiatives, the programs you're running, are they attracting new community members? Secondly, what's the engagement like? Are people just there because they want to be a part of your community, or they are there because they see something in that community that they would like to learn? So for instance, you are building a Web3 community. Should I expect to join your community, get to understand what Web3 is, and become an active contributor regardless of what I do? And then thirdly, there's contribution. After learning, what next? You're in a community, you've been attending sessions. What's the next thing? How do you give back to the community? Do you come back to say, I want to host a session? Or do you come back to say, I'd like to be a part of the mentors in a hackathon or whatnot? And then lastly, there's retention. Are they sticking around long enough, right? I understand life gets busy, people get busy. Over time, they just want to leave, or something just happens and they get distracted. But somehow, in between that, you're going to see if they are able to stay long enough to be able to give back. So these 4 pillars give a clearer picture of what your community health should look like. And let's look at core types of community metrics. I'm just going to run through these. So if you want to take a screenshot, please do that. The first one is awareness and acquisition. That's the growth metrics. So you're going to look at something like your total members, how many members join you per month, the sign-up process, referrals, where do your members come from? If someone should call you and say, people you have in your community, how many of them are Nigerians? And even in Nigeria, how many of them are in Lagos, or how many of them are in Abuja? Would you have that data? And then we also have contribution metrics. So what's the number of user-generated initiatives? If something is going on well in a community, people in that community would want to give back by writing articles, creating videos, or generally just talking about what's going on. And then there's contributions to produce docs, whatever it is. Sometimes people can come up and say, what's going on in the community, I'd like to contribute. And then there is governance, participation, if there are votes or proposals or things that need to be done, you see people come on board and say, I want to do this. That's contribution. And then there's also advocacy. So you're not just being a part of that community, you're giving back by advocating. I'm a part of this community, this is what's going on, come join us. And then there's retention and loyalty metrics. So these are things you get to track, like member churn rate, churn rate is actually very normal in a community because life gets busy. Sometimes your interest might change. You want to do something else in life. So churn rate is completely normal. Don't beat yourself up if that happens. There's returning members who keeps coming back, core contributor growth, member satisfaction surveys, word of mouth referrals. All right, and then there's also sentiment analysis. What are your community members talking about in the community? That helps you know if you're doing something right or if you're doing something wrong. If there's a conflict in the community, how do you resolve that? And yeah, final tips. First off, remember that numbers matter. It's very important, especially if you're an organization that is interested in getting sponsorship and all that. Numbers matter, but the only thing that you need to do is track where the growth is coming from. If a sponsor meets you today and says, I need this category of people, you should be able to provide that data. And secondly, remember, an engaged community is not a space where everybody will just come and say, GM everybody, and you just respond, GM every morning. That's not engagement. Engagement is participation, meaningful participation. What kind of discussions are being held? What kind of contributions are being done in that community? And then there is contribution metrics. Remember, Web3 communities thrive when members don't just consume, they contribute. And the more you contribute, to keep learning, you keep having experience. There is also retention and loyalty metrics. Would your community still be active if a core team member disappeared, or if majority of the team members decide that, oh, I'm moving on to something else? Would that community still stand? So these are my key insights for builders in general, builders, managers. You don't have to track everything. I know I've showed a bunch of metrics to track here, but you don't have to track everything. Look at 5 to 7 metrics that work for your community and track that. Balance quantitative and qualitative data. And then remember, your data should inform action. If it shows a drop-off, try to find out what's going on. Maybe people are not understanding the jargons. And yeah, this is what I am leaving you with today. The first thing you need to ask yourself is, what metrics am I tracking in my community? And also, are they vanity-driven or do they reflect true community value? Thank you so much. I hope I shared everything I could with metrics in community. If you have questions, please ask me there. Thank you.